Welcome to another episode of Savor Food and Body. Today, we are talking to Dr. Michelle May, who is a physician. She was a family physician, a mindful eating speaker, and a recovered yo-yo dieter who empowers others to take charge of their lives and end chronic dieting without deprivation and guilt. She is the award-winning author of Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat, a mindful eating book to break your eat, repent, repeat cycle. Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat was awarded 7 awards for publishing, including Best Health Book, Best Mind, Body, Spirit Book, Best Nutrition Book, and Best Self-Help Book. Michelle has been featured as a guest expert on the Discovery Health Channel, Dr. Oz, and Oprah Radio, and has been quoted in numerous national publications, including Glamour, Health, Parade, Parents Prevention, Self, Shape, Time.com, USA Weekend, and US News and World Report, the Washington Post, WebMD, Women's Day, Women's World, and many, many more. She is truly an expert in the field of mindful eating. Michelle practices what she preaches in order to balance her personal and professional life while maintaining her vibrant lifestyle. She enjoys yoga and hiking near her home in Phoenix, Arizona. She cherishes her relationships with her 2 grown children, Tyler and Elise. She and her husband, Owen, a professional chef, share a passion for gourmet and healthful cooking, recipe development, wine tasting, and traveling. So she's living what she preaches, which is so, so important to continue our practices in this way. So Dr. Michelle, thank you so much for being here today. It's truly an honor to speak with you in person. You've definitely been a mentor in my professional journey, learning about intuitive eating, and it's just wonderful to meet you face to face. So thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm so glad to get to talk with you and your audience.
So let's dive into kind of get a sense of your perspective on mindful eating. And mindful eating can almost can get a bad rap sometimes, especially because diet culture can co-opt it. And I know you really come at mindful eating from a very genuine place. But before we dive into that, let's explain to folks, what is this restrictive eating and why does it make it more difficult to eat in a balanced way, especially if we have maybe some chronic illness like diabetes, or many of our listeners are riding the waves of perimenopause. And so how can this restrictive eating kind of come into that picture when we're dealing with those health issues?
Yeah, Amanda, when I started teaching mindful eating, I was really trying to help people get out of the diet cycle like you do. And I didn't really realize that the diet cycle, what I called restrictive eating, was much bigger than just people wanting to lose weight or change their body in some way. The longer I did this work, the more people I worked with who were in a restrictive eating cycle because they genuinely wanted to improve their overall health, and they found themselves back in their restrictive diet cycles. So I think restrictive eating is it really comes down to about 3 words. I can't have. The minute you start saying to yourself, I can't have, you are probably in a restrictive eating cycle. And that can be for any reason, whatever your motivation is. When you start saying I can't have, it puts you in a very limited place, and it tends to create feelings of deprivation and cravings and eventually binging. So really, whether you're trying to improve your overall well-being because you have a health condition, or you're just trying to optimize how you feel so you can live your fullest life, if you can approach it from a non-restrictive perspective, it's going to be much more sustainable.
It's so true. The amount of conversations that I have with people initially kind of in that convincing, like binging always follows restricting. It just does, whether that's what we physically happens as our life plays out, or even from that mindset. So I like how you're starting there, even like if we even say to ourselves, I can't have this, like that's already setting the stage for
Mhm.
how we're going to have a rocky relationship with food.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how can we tell the difference then between restrictive eating and say I'm eating for health? Like this is just healthy eating. How can we tell the difference between that?
Yeah, well, I will say, and you mentioned before, and I love this conversation about how mindful eating has been co-opted by diet culture. And one of the ways that diet culture co-ops these messages is they have robbed the word health from us. And oftentimes
Yes.
when people are talking about healthy eating, there's some air quotes for you, they are actually talking about restrictive eating. So I've sort of moved away from even using the word health sometimes and use words about self-care and about well-being, because I think the bigger picture of how we want to feel, how we want to function, optimizing whatever medical conditions we might have that, that we're going to have to live with, can really allow us to begin to make choices that support us. So, when we're talking about the difference between restrictive eating and self care, you can tell because your life is either getting smaller or bigger. So, if you are in a restrictive eating cycle, your life is getting smaller. There are places you can't eat, there are foods you can't have, there are even people you shouldn't eat with, and portion sizes, and weighing, and measuring, and counting, and logging. And so, suddenly, your life is contracting down to what and how much you're eating, and perhaps how much you're exercising. When you're practicing self care for the purpose of optimizing your well being, your life gets bigger. You are making choices. You are feeling more energetic. You're feeling better. You're feeling in charge. You are not saying, I can't have. You are saying, I can eat anything that I want. And I choose to eat this because I love the way it tastes and I love the way it makes me feel. So life gets bigger instead of smaller.
I love that analogy. I think that that's really helpful for people to understand because it does get really complicated with all the messaging that people hear about, well, I'm just doing this for my health. And particularly if someone has a health condition. So, again, I see this a lot in perimenopause and menopause spaces, in that not that either one of those are a health condition, it's a season of life that all, the bodies go through. But when diet culture is approaching both of those stages of life as a problem that needs to be fixed, then I find it's really easy for women to move into that space of like, well, my health needs to be more in that restrictive way. So talk to us about if someone has a health condition, we'll just say diabetes, blood sugar is creeping up. Maybe it's not full-blown diabetes, maybe it's more pre-diabetic, but as a person is getting older, they're seeing their numbers increase. And so they generally want to improve their health. So why is it so difficult for many people to make these lasting changes when, like they say, they think that they're eating for their health? Why is that difficult for them to stick with it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think you and I probably have a lot of women that we work with who say, yeah, I get this mindful eating and intuitive eating thing. I've dieted my whole life and it never worked in a lasting way. But I can't do it now because I have fill in the blank. My doctor said fill in the blank. And I would actually take a very different perspective. As a family physician for many years, I don't practice medicine anymore, but I see that when somebody has a chronic condition, something that they are likely to have to manage for the rest of their lives, it's even more important to find a way to manage your eating that is truly sustainable. So, although maybe there's a tweak or something you can do short term, if it's not something you can do every day for the rest of your life, it's not going to make a difference. And many of these issues are things that you are going to need to make lasting changes for. So again, going back to the I can't have, if the food that you've decided or somebody decided for you is bad or not allowed, and all you're doing all the time is craving it, thinking about how you can substitute it, wishing you could have it, thinking you're going to have it as soon as this is over, any time, or having cheat days, anything where you are focusing on the thing that you've been told you can't have, that's not going to be a lasting change. So if you have any medical condition, or even if you're just in the mindset set of preventing certain medical conditions, maybe you have a family history, then of course, mindful eating and intuitive eating are the best ways that you can make these changes, because ultimately those are much more sustainable. They help you. I like to say that mindful eating isn't about being good like dieting is. It's about feeling good. So it's not about being good, it's about feeling good. And the better you feel, the more sustainable these changes really are.
Right. I so often say that feeling in our body is a much stronger motivator than seeing the scale or anything like that, change in pant sizes, anything. Because when we feel different, and nobody wants to feel like garbage. So when we feel different, then that makes us want to go out for the walk more often or
Mhm.
have the salad or whatever it is, but not from that place of deprivation or shoulding. I should be doing this. They
Mhm.
generally want to keep feeling that way in their
That's right.
body.
Well, it's really an inside out approach, right? So
Absolutely.
outside in is, what does my scale say? Did the doctor praise me? Even what are my numbers? Those are outside in. But day to day, moment to moment, you are always getting feedback from your body, always getting information about how to care for it. And so ultimately, as you said, Amanda, if you're paying attention to the fact that you feel better, that's going to be the motivator in making the choices that support your overall well being. And they don't have to be all or nothing, they don't have to be good or bad. There's a much broader range of choices that we can make. And when we're not depriving ourselves and restricting ourselves, we're less likely to swing from, oh, I'm being good today. Oh, it's the holidays. Now I'm being bad. Oh, now it's the new year. Now I'm being good. You don't have that kind of drastic swinging from one side to the other. There's a middle, there's a balance where we can make choices that feel good every day.
Mhm. Well, one of the reasons that we're airing this in January is this theme that I am proposing to my community is having undiet resolutions. So, having a way of looking at improvements that you want to make in your health, but do them from a place that, like you said, feels fulfilling, vibrant, expanding your life versus shrinking, feeling good in your body, working on that inside out approach. And it's a very different conversation than people are hearing a lot in January. One of the things that I'm particularly interested to hear your perspective on, especially having been a physician, is there are millions of diets out there, weight loss experts, many diets, the popular diets du jour. Oftentimes, physicians are saying like, "Hey, yeah, why don't you go try X, Y, and Z plan to help support your blood sugar?" I get that all the time from my clients, and so as a physician, having been a physician, having had your own life experience with dieting, why doesn't a weight centered approach to health work for most people? And the part B of that is, where do you think physicians get tripped up in recognizing that?
Well, physicians, for the most part, are part of our culture, which means they're part of diet culture. So they're hearing the same messages that you and I and all of our clients are hearing about what they should and shouldn't eat and should and shouldn't do. Unfortunately, and I just wrote a paper for the Nutrition and Clinical Practice Journal about making the shift from a weight centered to a weight inclusive approach, and did a full on data review with my two writing partners. And I'm going to tell you that the literature that clinicians are being presented with is very weight biased. It comes from the paradigm that weight is a measure of health, that changing your weight automatically improves health, that higher weight is automatically unhealthy and lower weight is automatically healthy. And none of those things are true. But it's the way that this paradigm informs the kind of research that's done, the kind of research that gets published, the conclusions that are drawn from research. So I feel for my clinician colleagues who don't have the time to read all the papers that I read for that review article, but they could read the review article, and I'd be happy to
Hint,
share a
hint.
link to that if you'd like. But I
Yes.
think that there's a lot of information out there that never trickles down to physicians. Now, some physicians like myself struggle themselves or have family members or other people they care for where they've seen this pattern. And so some are moving into a weight neutral or a weight inclusive paradigm simply because they already know from experience that the weight centered focus doesn't work long term. Sometimes they don't realize it because their patients don't come back after whatever they've told them to do hasn't worked, right? Or it worked and then it stopped working. And so they may not really be getting that information. And then another problem, a third problem, is that weight in general in our culture is seen as an individual issue. There's a myth that it is completely under our individual control. And I can tell you from that literature review that that is not the case. Weight is actually far more complicated than that. It is not simply calories in and calories out. There are many, many other factors that affect weight. And some of the factors are not even within your individual control. Genetics, social determinants of health, where you live has more to do or more predictive of your overall well-being than a number on the scale, for example. So I think oftentimes physicians just assume that you're not following the plan. And unfortunately, many people think that it's their own failing, that they just don't have enough willpower, they didn't try hard enough or long enough, they didn't find the right diet. So the whole mechanism of diet culture literally keeps people stuck because they think that they're the ones who are failing rather than recognizing that diets don't work and that physiologically and psychologically they lead us right back into the same, I call it the eat, repent, repeat cycle.
I love that. Oh man, I just had a session last night that I'm going to need that paper for.
I'd love to share it with you. And we also created a graphic for
Great.
clinical practices about changes that they can make to be more supportive of people in all bodies, because all bodies want optimal well-being and get to choose what that looks like for them individually. And I think that we need to be doing a better job as clinicians in helping people choose how they're going to live their lives and not being in a authoritarian sort of approach to this.
So glad you're doing that work for the professionals too, because that will change so much. The number of times, like I said, that I've had conversations with a client that they've just come from their annual physical and looking at the numbers, and they do start feeling that shame. And so if the conversation can start changing in that doctor's office, that's going to be a whole different experience
It's a game
for
changer.
people.
It's a game changer.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So we've been talking about mindful eating. Of course, folks listening to the podcast know a bit about intuitive eating, but let's dive in a little bit more to what isn't mindful eating and how can it help people change their relationship with food? Let's get a more specific on that.
Yeah, so there's a huge overlap with the way that we approach mindful eating and intuitive eating. The themes are very common. So mindful eating as a general definition is simply eating with awareness, and that would be awareness of whatever's happening in the present moment. So I like to say it's eating with intention and attention. So intention and attention, which means eating with purpose and awareness. So, for example, my favorite intention for eating is to feel better when I'm done than I did when I started. Now, back in my disordered eating days, I often did not feel better after I was done eating. I felt overly full. I felt maybe even a little sick. I felt guilty. I wasn't hungry for dinner, or, there was a whole complicated series of things that happen. But now my intention is to feel better. So I have to be aware of how hungry I am before I start eating. What am I really hungry for? My book series, as you said before, is called Eat What You Love What You Eat. And I think my next book should be And Eat What Loves You, because ultimately now I have a lot more awareness about how foods affect me and how I want to feel. So that kind of idea that awareness can create huge changes for you is really important, because as we said before, diets are outside in, what you should and shouldn't eat, how much, and it's all a bunch of rules that somebody outside of you created. Inside out is awareness of this natural set of skills of hunger and satiety to guide you, this understanding that you really truly can eat whatever you really love. And when you come to your table with that sort of perspective, the desire to eat it all or eat it all now because you won't be allowed to eat it tomorrow suddenly dissipates. And now you can listen to the feedback. Do I really love this food? Does this food really love me? And now you get to make decisions that are truly about your experience rather than somebody else's rules for what you should do. It truly makes the difference between going on and off diets for the rest of your life to creating a peaceful, joyful relationship with food, which then creates an incredible amount of space to go live that big life that you keep thinking you're going to get if you can finally stick to a stupid diet.
So true. So, playing some devil's advocate then here. So, what are some of the myths about mindful eating that can interfere with a person's intention to use it to guide their eating? And I think this question is particularly interesting because this is where I'm starting to hear some of like the diet culture versions of mindful eating and or making intuitive eating the hunger fullness diet. And so let's dive into some of those myths and how people can be aware of those.
Yeah, you're right on. It is being co-opted, and one of the ways that I can always tell that that's what's going on is when I read what's being written or said. What it sounds to me is mindful, Full. It's all about, oh, be mindful not to eat XYZ. Be very mindful that you eat before you go to the holiday party or whatever. I mean, it's a lot of obsession about food. Mindful and intuitive eating is the opposite. Although I will parenthetically say that when you're first learning how to eat this way, it does take awareness, it does take work, it takes a guide perhaps to help you, because it's so very different from what you've been doing for many, many years of diet culture. So some examples of mindful eating are chew every bite 32 times, eat in silence. That is really not what mindful eating is at all. The other thing I'm really seeing, and I know you are too, is diet culture is making mindful eating about weight loss. The truth is that I don't know what's going to happen to your weight when you finally start listening to your body. It's possible that you have been suppressing your body size through restriction and deprivation for decades. And when you finally are able to listen to your body weight may very well change. I don't know. That's not my business. And frankly, it's not your business either. It's your body's business. So I suggest that people focus on their decision making and let their body take care of itself. And it will. It will naturally help guide you toward more movement, eating in a way that feels balanced and joyful. And you don't need to measure those results by stepping on a scale every day. Let's see, another myth about mindful eating. You mentioned the hunger and fullness diet. We use a hunger and fullness scale in our programs as well. And I see this often. People will say, oh, I can't eat until I'm at least a 3, or I have to stop eating when I'm a 5. that is not what mindful eating is. It is normal eating. It is part of normal eating to sometimes eat when you're not hungry because it tastes good, or maybe because you want a little pick me up. And it's normal to sometimes eat past the point of fullness. There's nothing to feel guilty about. That is normal eating. The difference is when it's not a rule that you shouldn't do it, then you notice the effects of it. You wait till you get hungry again, and then you eat again, and your life goes on. You didn't fail, you didn't make a mistake. It just is. But again, the diet culture wants to turn this into a bunch of rules that you have to follow.
Mhm. Yeah, so well said. And when we stick with that, it's an inside job, not an outside job. Like that whole perspective can really help. So if, again, many of our listeners are women in midlife, so if someone wanted to try mindful eating, especially during this time of National Dieting Month, and they know they don't want to do that, what are some strategies or some tips, advice that you have for someone who wants to get started with mindful eating and avoid that diet culture version of mindful eating? What steps could they take?
Well, first accept that you've done this before, and it didn't work long term last time. So let's set that aside for right now. Let's not go down the path of another diet. A new year resolution or revolution, or whatever you want to call it, is really about making a big shift. So what I would recommend is instead just begin to increase your awareness. So whenever you feel like eating, pause for just a moment and check in with yourself. Am I actually physically hungry? Am I hungry? If you are hungry, then you can make some more decisions. How hungry am I? What am I hungry for? What do I want to eat? And so forth. If you're not hungry, that's also information. The next question would then be, well, then why do I want to eat? If my body doesn't need food, where is this desire to eat coming from? Am I bored? Am I stressed? Is it lunch o'clock? Like, what's happening right now? Am I procrastinating? Right? I mean, what's going on right now that's causing me to feel like reaching for food? What this does is it moves us beyond weighing, measuring, and counting food to really beginning to tap into our awareness of how we're using food in our life to take care of other needs that really, frankly, could be much better dealt with by finding something to do, finding, someone to talk to, getting the work done, and then eating when we get hungry. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that increasing your awareness simply by starting with the question, am I hungry, can lead you to taking better care of yourself. And ultimately, you will feel better, and that becomes more sustainable than any I can't have diet you'll find on the internet this month.
Absolutely. I've got one caveat question to that for you, just because I hear this a lot in my practice. If someone has been dieting, following the rules for many, many years, decades, and they say like, I just don't know when I'm hungry. I don't feel hunger. So how do you approach that in your programs when people are having a hard time identifying with hunger? Maybe they definitely know what fullness, and they probably feel what over fullness feels like often, but they say like, I have a hard time being in touch with that hungry. So
Yeah.
I eat because I think that I should, or more often I eat because this thing just looks delicious and I'm
Right.
eating that. So how do you approach that if someone says like, I have a hard time feeling hunger?
Yeah, I think it happens for several different reasons. One reason that people don't experience hunger is that they're eating for so many other reasons that their body never needs to tell them that they need fuel. So the one of the analogies I like to share with people is, imagine that you're driving down the freeway and you see a gas station and you think, "Oh, I should get gas." Are you automatically going to pull off every off ramp to fill up, or are you going to check your fuel gauge? You're going to look to see whether you actually need food. But a lot of people are in the habit of topping off every time the opportunity to eat presents themselves. So their fuel gauge never really drops low enough for them to get some hunger pangs or growling or grumbling. So that's reason number one. You're eating so often for other reasons, your body doesn't experience hunger. So use a little patience there. Notice what's happening in your body. I'm not asking you to starve yourself, but be patient and your body will tell you. The second reason that people don't experience hunger is because we've been taught to disconnect from our neck down. We are out of touch with the information our body has given us. And so reconnecting with your body in general can be really helpful. Maybe instead of trying to pay attention to hunger, maybe you just feel what it's like to stand in a warm shower and feel the little beads of water on your skin. And that begins to re-engage your senses to what your body is experiencing. And then another reason is that many people have been taught to eat on a schedule by diet culture. This is fear-based. If I don't eat every 3 hours, my metabolism will drop, right? This is a message that diet culture gives people all the time. You have to eat 3 meals a day and 2 snacks or whatever it is. And oftentimes the message is, if you get hungry, you'll lose control. That's not my experience with people. When they start to re-engage with noticing hunger, they feel much more in charge of managing their eating in a way that works for them. So let go of the fear that your metabolism is going to drop, and trust that you were born with the instinctive ability to know when your body needs fuel. Just like that fuel gauge in your car, you have a built-in fuel gauge that you just need to check once in a while. So let go of the fear and begin to learn how to trust again. It takes time, but that's why you and I do this work. It's really to help people and guide them through the process until they feel confident that, yes, I get it. I know what my body needs and how to take care of it.
Yeah, that building trust is so important in any relationship, right? And so this parallel between our relationships with our bodies, like it just makes sense for a lot of people. Like, oh yeah, trust is part of a healthy relationship with my body, with food. So that's brilliantly said. And I love that gas station analogy. I might have to steal that. That's brilliant. So where can people learn more about your books, any of your programs? Where would you like to invite people into your world, Dr. Michelle?
Thank you. Our website is called amihungry.com. So amihungry.com. And really that homepage will give you a download of the first chapter of Eat What You Love, Love What You Eat. There's other free courses and things that you can access there. And then on the tab at the top, it says for individuals. If you're an individual who's looking for help, you're going to find retreats, you're going to find workshops, we train facilitators. So you might have somebody in your area you can work with. So there's lots of different ways that you can get help. And my favorite is our support community. So if you're looking to work with people over time and learn this process, you can find that on amihungry.com too.
Excellent. So many good resources there. And thank you for being a tremendous resource, sharing your time on the podcast today. It's been a delightful conversation and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Amanda. I appreciate it.